Hi, today we're going to be setting up your painting station at your home. So if you can find a desk space, the first thing you want to do is cover your desk so you don't mess it up. So I put a piece of cardboard down here. In my acrylic painting class, I'm going to go over some of the supplies that we're going to use, but your class may have different supplies. So I have a canvas board that's ready to go. You may be working on canvas paper or gessoed paper or maybe stretched canvas. So I have that in front of me. If you are right-handed, you want to put most of the materials that you're going to be using on your right hand. If you're left-handed, put them on your left side. So we're going to use palette paper. So if I'm getting set up, I'm going to just take one piece of palette paper here and put this to the side. Your instructor may have given you a different kind of palette to use. That's fine. And we're going to have, we're using acrylic paint in this class. So in my class, I've ordered a set of basic acrylic paints by Liquitex, and I'll go over some of the colors here, and I've supplemented out some of the other things. So we have Mars Black, looks like titanium white, so that's going to be an opaque. We have a neutral here of burnt umber. We have Hooker's Green Hue Permanent, a primary blue, a primary red, primary yellow, and yellow oxide. From this basic set, some of the things that I felt were missing was having an alizarin crimson. So this is an alizarin crimson hue permanent, and also a phthalo blue. It's really hard to tell the difference between these two colors right now, right? And when you see it in the tube there, that's called mass tone. It may be a little bit easier to see this here, the difference between that, primary red and alizarin crimson. But one of the things, this is a student grade paint, and you're going to notice that these are a little bit grayed down. So I want to show you a little bit higher end paint. Also, what is acrylic paint? Some of you may be more familiar with painting with oil. Acrylic paint is going to have a pigment, it's going to have a binder, and in this case it's going to be a polymer binder, so plastic. And then the emulsion is water. So as the water evaporates, the pigments are trapped with the polymers and they're going to stick onto your support surface. So let me show you the difference here between a higher end paint. This is the kind of paint I like to use. It's called golden acrylic paints. And in my own studio, I use fluid acrylics. These are a heavy body acrylic that we're going to be using, kind of a buttery viscosity, where these ones are more fluid. You can also get high flow acrylics that will really allow you to do lots of dripping, but we'll go over that in other videos. So our primary blue, I'm going to assume, is going to be similar to a standard ultramarine blue. And then our phthalo blue, and other paint manufacturers, you're going to find them, they can come in red shades or blue shades, but you can see those are quite different here, even in their mass tone. And when we paint with them and glaze with them, they're going to perform very, very differently. Let me also show you the difference between maybe our primary red and alizarin crimson. So this one, in a higher end paint, it's going to have a lot more pigment and saturation. And this one says alizarin crimson hue. When you see a hue, that means this is going to be synthetically manufactured to imitate the natural mineral or pigment that's being used. And a lot of times that's going to be okay. So in addition to our paint sets, in my own studio, I have a couple other key colors that I like to use. And as you go on in painting, you may want to invest in some other things. So I'm going to go over some neutrals. So if you remember from your color theory classes, at the most basic, you need to have your primary colors, right? Red, yellow, and blue, and you can mix your secondary colors with those in your tertiary colors. And you want to have white and black to shade and tone, but we can do a lot with neutrals. So our package has yellow oxide. You might also see this being called yellow ochre. And another neutral, it looks very similar again when it's in the mass tone, but it's going to perform very differently, is raw sienna. These are going to have differences in terms of transparency and opacity, and their hue is fundamentally different. The other neutrals that I really like to use, so our package came with a brown, a burnt umber, so not bad, but I really think burnt sienna is a good basic, and then raw umber. So these are a couple other neutrals as you're investing in more paint that I would suggest. And the next thing is, as you go along, you may find there's particular colors that you really want that just you can't mix here. So two of my favorites, one is called quinacridone magenta, and this makes a fantastic purple and a fantastic pink. I really like that. And I really love this custom color here called Green Gold by Golden. The other fun thing, I'm gonna grab something here. You cannot mix these. And one of the best things about acrylic paints is fluorescence. So you can get fluorescent paints. You can also do iridescence and pearlescent paints. So that's a little bit about pigments, color. You're also going to need to have a medium. Acrylic paint, you're going to be able to wash out your brushes with water, but you're going to need to extend the paint to create glazes, to create it to be more fluid. You're going to need a polymer medium. So we're using GAP 100 here, and then you can use this to extend the paint. I'd also highly recommend getting a gel that has a lot more viscosity to it. Again, viscosity means the level of thickness. So you can see that layer. It's kind of like a little bit like peanut butter. We can use this both for making our paint thicker and extending it. We can use it for glazes just like we could this, but this is going to be very fluid. But one of the things that this is great for is we can use this for collage and doing image transfers. I can also use this, it's another supply I really like to use, it's painter's tape. So you can get painter's tape from the hardware store, you can get it from an art supply store, and we can use this to create hard edge painting. You can also tape off our edges and put gel medium on them so that the paint doesn't go underneath the tape, and you'll get really nice hard edges. All right, what brushes to use? So for my class, I've ordered a pretty cheap package of value brushes. We have a mix of synthetic and bristle brushes here. And the kind of brushes you'll see here, when it's shaped like that, that's called a round. And this is called a flat, when it's longer like that and flat on the top. And when it's rounded like that, that's called a filbert. Sounds like someone's name. There's another round. These are bristle brushes, these are synthetic. And then when it's a little bit shorter, right, notice how long that is? This is called a bright. My personal favorite brush to use is a bright. And the kind of brushes I like to use for acrylic that don't cost a lot of money, but they're one step up from this, are Winsor & Newton's University Bright brand. So these are kind of some of my favorite ones to use. I'd also highly recommend that you get some brushes, inexpensive brushes from the hardware store or an art supply store. This is a chip brush, right? Really inexpensive brush. I use these for gesso. You can also use them for painting. They're not going to last a really long time, but they're going to be good workhorse brushes. As you're spending more time painting, you may want to invest in an actual larger art brush like this. And the other thing that I do is I order brushes from the hardware store or from other manufacturers that are used for doing craft projects. This particular one is by a brand called Shipmate, and I love to use this. It's a bristle brush. I love to use this for glazing and also feathering things out. You can see right here. So it does not have to be fine art brushes that you use. If you have brushes from the hardware store, that's totally fine. Now, one of the catches is, though, use your brushes for acrylic. Once you use them for oil, you can't go back because that oil will be in the bristles and you can't use them again for acrylic. You're going to want to have a jar to keep your brushes in. And the reason for that is you want to keep them upright. You don't want to have your brushes down in your water, and you want to keep them dry. You're also going to need a cup of water to rinse your brushes out. And you're going to need to have some paper towels on hand to wipe your brushes. So these are some of the basics that you'll need. I also think, basic drawing supplies, a sketchbook, eraser, pencils, these kind of things. Those are some of the supplies that you'll need to get started with painting. Next, I'm going to talk about setting up a home easel. It is totally fine to work on your desk flat. I prefer working with something on the wall. So if you have a junky wall, you can put your canvas or your paper on to paint on, that's fine. Or you may want to get an easel. So this is an inexpensive portable easel. We could either have this on our desktop or we could stand it up straight. So this is an example of what it might look like. And I think if you're just working in your bedroom at home, this is more than sufficient if you're working on a relatively small scale. In my own studio, I either work on the wall or I use this easel here. So one of the things, whether you're sitting down or standing up, you want to make sure that you are putting your easel at the correct height. So if this is my canvas, I want to make sure that as I'm working, if I hold my arms straight out, it's right in the center of my canvas. You don't want to be like crouched down painting or reaching up too high. You want to be able to have the maximum amount of range of motion in your piece. It's going to really affect the kind of marks that you're going to be making. So the same thing, if you're sitting down, make sure to adjust the height of your chair or how high or low your easel is, so that when you're putting your arms straight out, it's in the center of where your easel is.